Hi, family. I'm an addict called Pam. The young lady that I'm going to introduce to you tonight, I forgot what I was going to say. Okay. The young lady I'm going to introduce to you tonight works a strong NA program, and I believe her bloodline runs Basic Takes Blue. With that, I give you Lisa A. Hi family, I'm an addict. My name is Lisa. And I'd like to take a moment, just to invite the God of my understanding and allow me to be the vessel to carry the message that the addict who still suffers is supposed to hear tonight. And sometimes that addict is me. So those who care to, please join me. All right. I'm grateful to be here. I'd like to thank the North Central Indiana area for asking me to come and share. You know, and I would hear people that would say, thank you for taking a risk on me, but I believe that everything that happens within the divine plan, so there are no risk taking. It is all supposed to happen. So I'm here by the grace of God, which means I am here by his unmerited favor. You know, I did nothing to deserve to stand up here, to be able to share my message as I live it with you all. Nothing special that I did. All I did was keep showing up a day at a time. And all I do on a regular basis is do exactly what they told me to do in the beginning. They said, meeting makers make it, I make meetings. They said, get a sponsor. Got one. Have an NA sponsor that has 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 an NA sponsor. For me, and this is my own personal recovery, this is my story. Narcotics Anonymous is home. I don't do any other fellowships. I don't read any other books. This is what works for me. I don't knock what works for other people, but this is here. I'm here just to share my experience, strength, and hope. I'm very nervous. And my first sponsor told me that if I wasn't nervous, then I was going to get up here and tell you a bunch of lies. So, because I came here to get honest, and even though there's only one person from my Get Honest crew here with me in Indiana tonight, that's okay, because now you all can be my Get Honest crew. You know, because I came here, you know, with no expectations. As a matter of fact, I probably thought that it would only be about 10 of us. We would be gathering in a circle, and I would be doing what I normally do, just like when I'm at home. But I'm grateful that I took a risk and that I came out to share. Not took a risk. I'm grateful that it happened the way it's supposed to happen. Excuse me. I want to tell you a little bit about me. I woke up on Friday morning and I looked in the mirror. And when I looked in the mirror, I said to myself, you know, as I looked at this stoutly body that I like to call the recovery spread, for those of y'all who came in here slim, you know what I'm talking about. and I looked at the recovery spread and I said, in order for me to be the person that I want to be, I must first accept the person that I am today. You know, so I had to look in the mirror at myself and say, yeah, your body might be a little bit rounder than it was maybe 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 years ago, you know. But this is who I am. And I hope by taking this time to share a little bit of me with a little bit of you guys, that we all go here with something. We all leave here with something. You know, I'm from a city, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Woohoo! You know, I moved to Ohio when I was a teenager. I went to high school in Ohio. But where I came from, it was concrete in the front of the yard, and it was concrete in the back of the yard. The closest I got to grass was when I went to Fairmount Park, and that was over for all the, you know, the whole city, you know. So I'm out here in the wilderness, you know, in foreign territory, away from all my friends, away from my comfort zone, you know, and I'm here and I feel very vulnerable. I feel very exposed. But you know what? I'm okay because I'm in the care of. You know what I'm saying? And I got all that through coming to this program called Narcotics Anonymous. You know, and I grew up in the city, and I have younger brothers. I have four younger brothers by my father, and by my mother, and I have one younger brother and a sister by my father, in my father's family. And so I grew up with these four younger brothers, and in my home, you know, when I was a little girl, my mother severely abused me, and she scarred me physically for life. And so at a very young age, I was separated from my birth mother. And, you know, I've always wanted to have a relationship, you know, with women, you know, but I never had any real role models. My grandmother raised me, and my grandmother was 45 years older than me. So when other people were walking in the park with their mothers and, you know, taking, you know, bike rides and roller skating, and when I would see my friends going and doing things with their mothers, you know, something in me would ache, you know, because I didn't have that relationship with my mother, you know, and I couldn't have that relationship with my grandmother. But my grandmother raised me the best that she could. And, you know, I hear this term since I got here, they call it dysfunctional. You know what I'm saying? And man, I didn't know nothing about dysfunctional. All I knew was that we had what we had. We did the best we could with what we had. And my mother, my grandmother is who I call my mother ran numbers, street numbers. And I don't know if you guys know anything about that, but it's like a legal lottery, you know. And my brother, my older brother, who also lived in the house, he sold marijuana. So I lived in a house where that, you know, it was always something going on. You know, there was always people in and out. You know, they had parties, they played Pacino, you know, they took cans around. And, you know, we live in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a bunch of neighborhoods, you know. So, like, it's a neighborhood, and everybody on my block lived in a two-parent family. And here I am. Not only do I not have a parent, but I live with my grandmother. So from an early age, I felt like I was different from other people. And I continued in a journey to ostracize myself from society. You know, when my addiction came in, it was just, you know, like they say, it's only 10% of the problem. When I finally picked up the dope, you know, it was on. But I need to go back a little bit. So when I lived in this house, I mean, you know, all these things seemed to be natural. But I would start to go and visit with my mother, because my mother still lived in the city, and my grandmother would allow me to visit, because in order to see my brothers, I had to visit with her. And I remember going to visit with my brothers, and sometimes I would spend the weekend, and they started taking me to the uncle's house. And the uncle, when I was 9 years old, decided that, you know, he wanted to show me what love was. And he did it in a physical way. And what he told me is that if you love someone, this is how you show another person. And you know, and it wasn't until here recently that my brother started to be back in my life, and he told me that when we were young, that I tried to show him that same kind of love. You know, my brother was 2 years older than me, and I tried to show him, because I loved him so much, I tried to show him that same physical kind of love. You know, when he said it to me, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I remember thinking, oh my God, you're saying I'm a pedophile, and oh no, not me, oh no, 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 and just getting all freaked out, not wanting to talk about it, and not wanting to acknowledge about it, not wanting to acknowledge it. But that is a part of who I was. And what I know is that hurt people, you know, and I was hurt, and I didn't know any better. I was a kid, I wasn't an adult, you know what I'm saying? I was a kid, and I did things with kids, with my brother. And you know, that's a big thing for me, you know, because I try to always be this person that's happy and you know, and up, you know what I'm saying? And I try to, you know, I'm so much, and when Pam was saying about the basic text blue, I'm so much into this recovery thing that sometimes I don't talk about how I feel, you know. Sometimes I hide out in recovery, you know, and, you know, it created some feelings in me, you know, because I felt instantly shame and guilt and fear, like, oh my God, now I'm labeled as something, and I looked at him and I said, I understand that that's what I've done, or that's what I did when I was a kid, but I ain't living like that no more, And what I know about that is that I cannot change what happened to me in the past. All I can do is acknowledge what it is, take the necessary steps to move forward and get past that. Eventually my mother, she had 5 children. By the time she was 21 years old, she got tired of, being a mother, I guess. She had me when she was 14 years old. And she jumped on the train one day and she moved to California and she never came back. So in that process, I was separated from my brothers. So for 14 years, I didn't see my brothers. I didn't know if they were alive. I didn't know if they had, children. I didn't know if they went to school or were they incarcerated, if they felt the same kind of messed up feelings that I had felt all those years. I didn't know anything about them, And then when I was 13 years old, my grandmother told me that after my grandfather has died, that we were moving to Ohio. And I came to Ohio, with some family, but not having any friends. Now I need to go back a little bit because I need to tell you that on my 10th birthday, I decided that I didn't like the way I felt. Like I said, I felt different. I lived on a block with 2 people, a 2-parent home, and here I was in this single parent home raised by a grandmother, and my brother sold marijuana, so it was easily accessible. So on my 10th birthday, I decided that I would smoke a joint. And on my 10th birthday, I believe that I felt better than I had ever felt in all my days, just for that moment, I didn't realize that was the beginning of the end for me, And so I came here, my mother said, well, we moved to Ohio, you'll have a better life, things are different, it's a much slower place, and, all that stuff, and all those things were true. I moved to Ohio, and, how they talk about wherever I go, I take me with me. So I'm already a full-blown addict, I'm already smoking dope every day, I had not started to drink or do anything like that, but I was smoking dope every single day, And so here I come to Ohio, and being, like when you're from a big city, people think, they have these preconceived notions about you, you know what I mean? Oh, you're bad, you must be cool, you know what I'm saying? And so I had to, at that time, I felt like I had to do all those things. I had to be bad. I had to be cool. I had to be, hip. And, I tried to the best of my ability to live up to those roles. So I was always a person who felt like they had to fight. I had brothers. I fought my brothers. When I was a young girl, I was very introverted. I hardly ever talked. Didn't have much to say. I danced a lot and I sang a lot. And that's all, that's the only way I could ever get outside of myself, but any other time than that, I was basically really quiet. They talk about having low self-esteem. I had no self-esteem. I looked at the ground all the time, the same way I did when I first came in here, and I didn't have much to say. So then I get to the city, so I want to change. I want to be somebody different. I want you guys to look at me in a different light. And so I got to this little town called Columbus. It was a little town to me now. I got to this town, called Columbus, and here I am, big girl from the big city. I gotta, show you guys. Plus, I want to live differently than I lived before. But because I took me with me, very, very soon, I found dope, And my story is that I continued to use for 15 years. I used obsessively, And once I got the first one, I acted out compulsively, and that is my story as far as using. I don't think that, we're here for me to tell you how many drugs I use, because it told me in the literature. It doesn't matter who your connections were, what drugs you use, how much or how little, but only what do you want to do about your problem and how you can help. And as a matter of fact, I was sitting in the lunchroom earlier today, and I was talking with some girls, and we were talking about our stories a little bit, and they were saying some things that I had never experienced. And I started, the disease is so cunning, baffling, powerful, and insidious. And insidious means quietly harmful. And it was whispering in my ear, and it's saying, maybe you're not an addict. Maybe you shouldn't be sharing. You know, you didn't do that, you know, because when I came into recovery, I still had a place to live. I still had clothes. I still had friends. You know, I have friends that are in my life that have been in my life for years. I did not burn all my bridges, you know, or anything like that. And a lot of times I would sit in meetings and I would try to disqualify myself from this program by listening to other people's stories. Like they were like, I shot, you know, I took a spike, I put it in my neck, and I'd be like, oh my God, you know. Doesn't matter how much, how little, who, what, where. The fact is, the thing that makes me an addict is the way that I feel. Like it says in the basic text, it said it's our reaction to drugs that makes us an addict, not how much we used, you know. So I was listening to them at the story, and I was thinking, you know, maybe they should be telling their story, and I should be sitting down there, which is what I would rather do anyway. I'd rather be sitting out there looking at somebody than be up here trying to expose myself to other people, you know. But that's okay too. And you know, there are a lot of things that happened to me in the time of my addiction. You know, I went away to school. I was trying to, you know, fix myself. I had started to begin to use a particular drug, and I remember saying that this drug was the end. You know, this drug was the drug that made me crawl across the floor, reach into my grandmother who had raised me, who had loved me, who had cared for me all my life, reach into her drawer, take out her MAC card. I knew she was on a fixed income, but then I would crawl back out in the middle of the night, you know, being a nocturnal creature, and I would put the money in the ghost in the ATM, looking for some money to come out there. I would get that money, I would run and I would cop, and then I would go back again, knowing that I was taken from somebody who loved me. But I don't know about y'all's disease, but my disease said, get up. It said, let's go. It said, do whatever you got to do, and let's go and get it, and you better get it now. So that's what I did, you know, and I had a lot of shame about that, you know, but I'm not responsible for my addiction, but I am responsible for my recovery, you know, so that allowed me to let go of a lot of that shit, you know, I want to say game and show, you know, but guilt and shame, you know, and so, like, I was using this particular drug, and, you know, I had to do certain things, you know, and like we were talking about insanity today. I said, it's real insane, you know, to do some of the things that I did. You know, it's real insane to think that nobody sees you. You know, when your eyes are bigger than saucers and you're walking around like a creature in the night, you know, and nobody can see that I'm all messed up, you know, or you go over your family's house and you're all messed up, you know, and you know, I thought my mom didn't know because, of course, she was, you know, 50 years older than me. Nobody knew but me. It was a secret. Shh, don't tell anybody. You know, so I'm walking around in this world thinking, you know, in this world of my own, thinking that, you know, I'm somehow different from other people, you know. But I'm so grateful that I came to this program called Narcotics Anonymous, because you all let me know that we are the same. It doesn't matter, you know, what state we live in. It doesn't matter if what our social status is. It doesn't matter about any of those things. You know, the common denominator for being here is that we wanted to stop using, you know. And the thing that I have to remember on a regular basis is my primary reason for coming to Narcotics Anonymous and not anywhere else, you know, because I tried religion, I tried psychiatry, and like it says in the literature, none of those methods were sufficient for me, you know. The primary reason for coming to Narcotics Anonymous is the fact that I do not want to get high. You know, I don't want to use dope, no matter what, drugs. You know, that was my primary reason for coming to this fellowship. And the minute that I forget that that's my primary reason for being here, that's the minute that I get high. So I keep showing up so that I can keep remembering. And that means when a newcomer comes in the door, you know, it says, you know, even the person with One Day Clean has something to offer to us. You know, so when a newcomer comes in the door and his ass is tore off the frame, excuse my language in here, you know, and I'm looking at this newcomer and I see the pain that's in their eyes, you know what I'm saying? Because I could dress up my outside real good, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I still had things, but it was something in my eyes. When you looked inside my eyes, you could see inside my soul, I believe, and you would know that I was hurting and that I was in a lot of pain, and all I wanted was the absence of pain. And y'all told me that if I keep coming back and if I show up, if I start to work the steps, and if I start to take an active change in the change of my life, that I would stop having that look in my eyes. you know. So I keep coming back and I keep showing up and I keep being able, man, when I came in here, I looked at the floor and she said a carpet cruising or something like that. She was telling me today. I wasn't looking at the floor because I was carpet cruising. I was looking at the floor because I had an inability to look another human being in the eye. You know, I was so ashamed of everything that I had done in my addiction, all of the people, all of the masks that I had worn, all of the things that I had done. I was so ashamed of that person that I couldn't even look at you. When you would say, "How you doing, Lisa?" I say, "Fine." You know, "What's going on with you?" "I'm okay." You know, "What's wrong with you?" I don't know, nothing. You know what I'm saying? And it really amazes people that I was ever an introvert because I'm such an extrovert now. You know, but it's true. And but you know, it's funny. Laughter helps me not to be so nervous. You know what I mean? But I didn't have the ability. You know, I didn't have the ability. You know, like they say, it talks about the ability to feel human was lost. You know, like I said, in my addiction, I went away to school, and because I got high, probably like y'all got high. You know, one night I laid in the field, and I was drunk beyond control, and they said that I needed to be helped to my room, and I was helped to, who is now the father of my daughter, I was helped to his room, you know, and 9 months later, you know, I had a baby. And for a long time, it was really hard for me to accept being a mother. You know, it was a very difficult process. And you know, I get better at this mom thing every year, you know. But for a long time, it was real hard for me to accept that I had a child. Because all my life, I partied. I mean, you know, I had big parties. And with lots of stuff, and I thought that I was the coolest, you know, thing known to man, you know. And so now I couldn't have any of all those parties, you know. But because I had this disease, my disease said it didn't matter that I had a kid in the house. You know, I was talking with the ladies earlier, and we were talking about, you know, people walking along the streets at night trying to find the next one, you know, and I didn't want to do all that, so I brought the dope in my house. You know, I brought the dope boys and girls or whoever into my house where my small child lives that was still in Pampers, you know. So like getting with the insanity was real easy for me because it's insane, you know, to think that nothing might happen to her, you know, and by the grace of God, to this day, as far as I know, nobody ever touched her. But that is only by the grace of God, you know, because things could have happened. But my disease didn't care anything about that. It didn't care that I had a kid. It didn't care that I wanted to be a good mother. It didn't care that I had this person that loved me and just wanted a mom, you know, just wanted somebody to be there for them. She wanted somebody to believe in her. You know, but I couldn't be that person. I was incapable of feeling the feelings that it takes, you know. And it's so funny because today, you know, I brought my daughter here today because I figured this was a safe place to be. I've never taken her to a convention, and I travel all the time. And I brought her here, and you know, right before I came to share, I decided I wanted to go out and off along the path around the river and see all the things that they were talking about, the tree and what have you, and you know, I asked my daughter to go with me, and she, you know, started to walk along the path with me a little bit, and then all of a sudden, you know, then she had to go to the bathroom, and then she was tired, and you know, and now, see, I want to be a mother on my time, you know, on my own terms, and she was like, I don't want to be bothered with you, basically, and it really hurt my feelings. You know, and then in an instant, I got angry, you know, because when I got here, there was only two emotions that I felt. You know, I was either angry or I was happy. You know, I didn't have all those, you know, oh, I feel, you know, disgusted and, you know, all those, you know, words we get on that feelings list, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if y'all ever seen that. I didn't know all that stuff. You know, I was either mad and angry, enraged, you know, and things. I knew all those words that, you know, identify with that. I was happy, you know, and I was, you know, in a good mood or whatever. So in the moment I got angry, how dare she not want to come and walk in the nature with her mother, you know? she didn't want to be bothered with me, you know. And what happened is I was hurt, you know. And today I can say things hurt my feelings, you know. But hey, she's okay, and I told her to do whatever she has to do, and I still went on the path. You know, there was a time when that would have deterred me, and I would have shut down, and I would have not gotten in touch with the feelings that I was feeling, and I would have not kept going in the path that I was going, and I would have went, and I would have sat in a corner somewhere, and I would have cried, and, you know, and oh, I'm a bad mother, and oh, you know, oh, poor me, you know. But today, self-pity is the enemy, you know, and I can't allow self-pity to be the thing that keeps me stuck in any situation. So I went out there and I went and walked on the thing. But my daughter has grown up with me, and one of the things that happened to me, like I said, my mother severely abused me. And my daughter had, you know, of course, lived in this house where they were dealing drugs, and, you know, and then all of a sudden they weren't dealing drugs in the house, and all of a sudden now, you know, here mom wants to be this mother, you know. And all her life I had been, my mother, my grandmother, mother, whatever, she was diagnosed with diabetes when I was still a young girl, and she had started to get sick. Now all this time while I am, you know, out doing whatever I'm doing, my mother takes care of my daughter, you know, and then she would come over the house, and I would, you know, be with her a little bit, and then she would go back over my mother's house. So my mother called me one day and she said, Lisa, I'm sick and I need you to come and get Dominique. I can't take care of her anymore. And in the moment, the self-centered addict that stands here before you said, you know, how dare you not be able to take care of her? You mean that I have to be responsible? You know? And I didn't want to be responsible. I didn't want to be this mother, you know? But I had to go and get her, and I had to take care of her. So now I got this kid that has all these feelings, because children have feelings too, you know? So she started acting out, and I sent her to daycare, and every day they were sending home a note, 2 pages long, front and back, telling me about my sweet little girl. My little girl is born, and she's turning over the cots on the other little kids, and she's pouring water, and she's kicking, and she's screaming. She's angry, and she's hurt, and she doesn't know what to do with herself, and she's acting out. Man, same behaviors in adults. You know what I'm saying? Because I had those same things. I used to kick, and I used to scream, and I used to fight, and I would act out because I just didn't know what to do with myself. And so I had this kid, you know, and every day they would call me on my job. Man, when they start calling me on my job, then I got angry. You know, now I'm telling you, I come from a place where abuse ran rampant. You know, when my mother got mad at me, she took my hand, she put it in the oven. And she broke my ribs. So when I was a little girl, I was hospitalized for a long time because I was acting out. I was scared. I was afraid. I was alone. I didn't know what to do with myself, you know. When I got out for a little bit of freedom, you know, and I was the oldest kid at that time in that house. And when I got out for a little bit of freedom, I tried to run. I tried to play. I tried to be, you know, a normal kid, man. But I wasn't a normal kid. You know, so when I started getting these letters home, you know, about my daughter that she was acting out in school, you know, I started to get angry, you know, and I started to feel, you know, some feelings like I really wanted to just tear her tail up, you know, and because I am a person who was abused severely, I was the one that had to break the cycle. And instead of abusing my child and beating her to death and taking all this, you know, man, going back to the original pain and bringing all that pain and bringing it and putting it on my child, before I was willing to do that to her, I called a family member and I asked, could she come and stay with them for a while, you know? And so she did. And so therefore, I broke the cycle, you know? And when she went, she stayed there for about 5 months, and then she came back home, and we were in a better frame of mind, the both of us, you know. So not only did I save her, I saved myself, you know, because I didn't want to live like that anymore. You know, we have the ability to change our lives. Now, I didn't have any program at that time, but I knew that I didn't want to be the person that my mother was, because I saw myself becoming that person. I saw myself being angry and enraged and capable very capable of doing the same kind of things. Maybe not to that extreme, but doing those same kind of things. So my daughter came back and she's okay, and she still, you know, doesn't do what I want her to do. You want to learn a lesson in power, let's have children. You know what I'm saying? You know, why won't you do it when I tell you to do it, you know? You know, but she came back, she came home, we're okay. And while she was gone, I had made a decision that I wanted to try to do something different about my life, you know. I need to tell you that on November 10th of 1993, I was in a bar in my usual spot. I was having a Killer Kool-Aid, which is a drink that has about 5 different types of alcohol in it, because when I did everything to the extreme. I'm an extremist, you know what I mean? And they're talking about drink Old Duels for what? Who drinks for the taste of beer? You know, I drank to get drunk. I got high to get out of myself, out of my mind. I tried to use until I could not use anymore. I did not want to exist in this body. I tried to magically lift myself out of it and do some kind of out-of-body experience or what have you. So I made a decision to on November 10th, I was in this bar and I was having this, and I had been coming to meetings. So I need to go back. I started coming to meetings because there was a girl in my neighborhood. You know those people that you say, if I ever get as bad as her, then I'm not going to use anymore. You know what I'm saying? And so it was this girl that was in my neighborhood, you know, and she used and she had stopped using this particular drug, man. And she was going to this meeting and she had a sponsor, right? But she drank every now and then. And she smoked pot every now and then. But she was getting better in that other area. So I decided that I was going to go to these meetings with her and drink every now and then and smoke pot every now and then, you know. But I went to meetings, and I went to meetings probably 3 or 4 times a week. And as a matter of fact, I stood up and I got clean time, you know, because I'm not using a particular drug. I mean, I'm talking about refusal. You know, refusal is that river past denial, you know what I mean? I'm talking about being so locked in look, it says you can't grasp a new idea on a closed mind. I'm talking about being so closed-minded to total abstinence, you know, that I couldn't even hear it. When they were in our area, they say in our meetings that, please, you know, no drugs, outfits, weapons, or paraphernalia on your person for the protection of the facility, the meeting, and Narcotics Anonymous as a whole. Man, somehow that whole thing eluded me, you know. I just did not want to hear that. And I kept coming to meetings, right? And at first I stopped bringing it in my pockets, you know, but I kept coming to meetings, right? And then I started leaving it in my car, right? But I kept coming to meetings, right? And then I started leaving it at home, but I kept coming back, right? And then eventually, you know, on November the 10th, when I was in that bar, all of a sudden the mind full of hope and the body full of dope no longer mixed together. And I said, I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired of being dependent on anything, you know, to sustain my life. Or that's what I thought it was doing. And on November 11th is my clean date. November 11th in 1993. Today I have 6 years, 6 months, and 17 days, you know. And for a long time, you know, I was that person. I was that addict that they said, man, you know how you sit around, you're talking with your friends, you know, and you say, when I die, because, you know, we talk about death. I don't know about y'all. We talk about when we die, please bury me in the casket with a sack. You know, I was that addict. You know, I believed in my way of thinking that I was going to die using, you know, and ask my friends to bring it for me, you know. But on November the 11th, I decided to I made a decision. Now, I need to say that when I was going to meetings, these 18 months before I actually got clean, I would go to meetings and I would ask women to sponsor me because they said you need a sponsor, right? So I would go to meetings and I would ask women to sponsor me. And the first woman I asked, she said, I'm getting married. I'll be moving out of town soon. I'm moving to Detroit and I can't sponsor you. I said, okay. But I didn't give up and I kept coming back. So I went to the next woman and I asked her to sponsor me, and she said, because they said you should, they was like, you should have someone who at least has 2 years clean. I had heard that somewhere from somebody, have 2 years clean, and I didn't even get that part, working knowledge of the steps. That part I wasn't on that yet. But so I went to this woman and she had a couple of years clean, and I asked her, I said, will you sponsor me? I need a sponsor. In my most humble voice, I asked her. And she told me that she didn't have anything to give me. And you know what? That woman relapsed after having 6 years clean. So, she probably saved my life because I didn't know anything. I was just as green as grass. And look, if my sponsor used, I might have believed that I was supposed to use too, So I didn't give up. I asked another woman to sponsor me. She lived in a little county outside of Columbus, and she said that with the time that I had clean, I needed somebody who was right there in the area. So I didn't give up, and I kept coming back. And then I finally got clean. I finally surrendered. And what I believe about this thing, is that if you take that desire, see, I had a desire because I kept showing up for meetings. And then since they say the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using, I was showing that I had a desire, right? And then I took that desire and I coupled it with a little bit of willingness, right? And then what I got as a result of that was some surrender. So then on November the 11th, when I got clean, completely clean, I was in a meeting 2 weeks later after that, and I was sitting in a bench, and it was on a Saturday night, man, and I'm telling you, I like to have parties. I felt like I needed all these people around me all the time because I can disappear in crowds. If I'm out here and it's just a couple of us, I might have to talk to you. I might have to show you who I am. I might have to be vulnerable with you. I might have to open up. You might get to know me and you might like me. And then I might set myself up to be left again because, of course, I already had these abandonment issues that I got from my maternal mother. So, I was at this meeting, a player like me, on a Saturday night at a meeting, and I saw this woman. She had this blazing red hair, and she was at the meeting, and there were women around her, and they were hugging her, and they were loving her, and they were laughing, and they were looking happy, joyous, and free, And I looked at her, and I wanted what she had to offer, and I was willing to make the efforts to get it, And I looked at her and I asked her after the meeting, and I asked her, would she be my sponsor? And she said yes. Now, all this time when I'm using and I'm still in this refusal thing, nobody would sponsor me. Maybe if somebody would sponsor me, they probably would tell me, you ain't clean anyway, But nobody would sponsor me. But once I decided to surrender, it's an amazing thing that happened. Remember, nothing happens by coincidence. It's all in the divine plan. So I finally surrendered, and here it is. This woman, she said, yes, I'll sponsor you. And I got all excited. Man, you would have thought she gave me $100 bill. I was like, yeah, I got a sponsor, What do you need me to do? My sponsor said, I go to this meeting on Monday, this meeting on Tuesday, this meeting on Wednesday, this meeting on Thursday, this meeting on Friday, and this week on Saturday, and on Sundays, I might do this meeting, but I might stay at home. So what do you think I did? I did this meeting on Monday, this meeting on Tuesday, this meeting on Wednesday. Wherever she was, I was. Look, I said, I wanted what she had to offer, and I was willing to make the efforts to get it. So I did what she did, and I'm telling you what, here I am 6.5 years later, I'm still clean, And I got with the sponsor, and my sponsor said that I needed to get a support group, that I needed people who believed in me and wanted to help me in my recovery. I needed to have some new associations in my life. So I decided that I would have this sponsor. My sponsor had about 8 sponsees at that time. And she wanted to have these gatherings, you know what I'm saying? These sponsee gatherings. And so here it is, all these women, and we have to get together. Now, like I said in my story, I didn't have any role models of healthy relationships with women, And the first healthy relationship I ever had with a woman was with my sponsor. She was the first person I was ever able to get honest with. She was the first person I was ever able to be vulnerable with. She was the first person I ever was able to be intimate with, And I remember having these sponsor gathering, and there were women there, and I would look at these women, and I'd be like, man, I don't want to do these chick things, and, you know, I don't like that, and I ain't like that, you know. I don't need all these women in my life. And all I was afraid. I was afraid to do anything different than I had already done, you know. But I was willing to make the efforts to get it, you know. I was willing to do what was necessary. So I started having some relationships with women, and I had a couple. But then there were some things that I wanted in my recovery that those women in my sponsorship family and a lot of women in my area were not doing. And I had this real addictive knowledge for this book. You know, they told me to give myself a break and read it. Man, I took a hold on it. And look, my book is one of those books that people talk about, you know, that are well read and the pages are falling out, but it's my book, you know. And I used my book and I held on to it. So I got with people who did what I like to do, you know. And fortunately and unfortunately, there were men, you know. And so I have some of the best relationships with men in my area. I have a lot of asexual relationships with men. You know, where when I'm in a jam, man, they're right there for me, and vice versa. You know, but I still needed these relationships with women, and I had not turned my back on that as of yet. You know, so I started to continue on in this journey, and the way that I was going to be able to be intimate with somebody else was that I had to be able to get to know who I was. And the way that I was able to do that was I had to start working on some steps. So, you know, my sponsor said, you know, we need to get started, and the first thing I want you to do is write your story. And she told me to write this story, and I said, well, you know, what do you want me to write about? You know, because I'm very analytical. I like to pick things apart. I'm addicted to certainty. I want to know the who's, the whys, the what's, the whens. I want to know what's going to happen before I get there, and how it's going to turn out once I start this thing. So, talking about a self-centered addict, you know what I'm saying? So, you know, she told me to write this story, and I wrote this story, and I started to write, you know, these things about me. And, you know, I started to see, you know, this person that I had been all this time. And some of those things I looked at and I said, man, I don't really particularly care for that, you know. And some of these things I looked at and I said, man, I thought I was worse than that, you know. But what it was a tool to get me to start writing. It was a tool to get me to open up, you know. And then we started to take the steps, you know. And my steps, my first step said, you know, that I was powerless over my addiction and that my life had become unmanageable. It was real easy for me to see the unmanageability in my life, you know. Today, it's still easy for me to see the unmanageability in my life. I was talking to Bernie about this, the checkbook thing and putting my coin in my checkbook, and I was thinking, she said like something about, you know, maybe not balancing, but not writing bad checks, not bouncing the check. And I was like, man, maybe I need to put my coin in a checkbook because I can become real unmanageable with money, you know, and that's real easy. And the one thing that I believe about my first step is that there are, you know, 4 A's in the first step. And the first one is admittance. At first, I need to admit that there's a problem in order to do something about it. The next one is acceptance. And, you know, once I accept that there's something going on, once I accept that there's a problem, let's just say, for instance, I always like to use this thing with the spot on the floor. You know, okay, there could be a spot on the floor, you can tell me there's a spot on the floor, but if I'm in refusal, I don't care about that spot on the floor. I'll walk over that step, I'll walk around the spot, but it will still be a spot on the floor. But once I admit that there's a spot on the floor, then I can do something about it, you know? So first I gotta admit that there's something on the floor. Then I gotta accept that there's something that needs to be done about it. You know, well, first thing is awareness. First I'm aware that there's a spot. Then I admit that there's a spot. Then I can accept there's a spot, so then I can take action. So the 4 A's are awareness, admittance, acceptance, then action. And that's how it works with me in all the things, in everything I do. You know, especially in a situation with people. You know, because I think I get my biggest lessons in powerlessness when it comes to others. You know, because I can't control another person's thoughts, feelings, actions, and can't get it out. Thoughts, feelings, actions, and emotions. You know, I want to try to control, like my kid is having, you know, I call her a flip artist, you know, because sometimes she just goes into her own little mode. And of course, I want her to be happy, and I want to know what's wrong with her because I want to fix, you know. And, you know, we call it being a caretaker, you know, all these terms. And I heard somebody say that caretaking is the sunny side of control. You know what I mean? You know, so I really want her to feel the way that I want her to feel. I don't want her to be sad. I don't want her to have these moments when she just feels like being alone. I want to try to control her actions and what's wrong with you and why don't you do this and this will make you happier when she just wants to feel her feelings. You know, so I'm completely powerless in that area. You know, and once I admit that I'm powerless, then I have to come to the power greater than myself to help restore me to sanity. Once I see that, once I try to control something that's making my life unmanageable, you know, then of course it's real easy for me to see the insanity in that. And then I need to, you know, try to come to a power greater than myself to help restore me to sanity. And that power greater than myself when I first got here was the group. I did not have a concept, you know, that I was willing to live with of God when I got here. And that's real important, one that I was willing to live with, you know. And so when they told me that a power greater than myself could be anything, you know, I chose that power to be the group. Because, see, you guys had more experience at living life than I did when I got here. You were able to share things with me, you know, that I didn't think I had any answers to, you know, and I was willing to open up and I was willing to ask for help, you know. And I'm going to give you a real prime example. My mother died on March 6th of 1997. And I was at a hospice with her because the diabetes is so great. She had lost her limb a year before, the first limb. And on Valentine's Day of that next year, she lost her second limb. So she had no legs. She was a light-skinned woman. She had become very dark, you know, because she was on kidney dialysis, and it makes you very dark. And you know, she had lost her hair. She had grown a mass in her breast that they believed to be cancerous. And the mother that I knew, you know, this woman that I knew was dying right in front of my eyes. Because, you know, the way that thing works is that it eats you from the inside out, you know. And I was watching her, and I would look at her, and I would see her suffering. And then I got to this point, and I'm talking about being so self-centered that I didn't want to go to the hospital. When she went to the nursing home, I didn't want to go to the nursing home because I didn't want to see her like that. I didn't want to remember like that. Man, I'm talking about being self-centered, you know, not wanting to get outside of myself and go and help somebody who gave me my life, who saved my life, you know. And I remember in the end that I was there. I remember getting outside of myself, and I remember when she started to go to the hospital, and when she had her leg amputated, that I started to go to the hospital, you know. And I remember going up there and her near dying several times, and us asking, what do you want to do, you know. And my brother could not make the decision, you know. Although he is 11 years older than me, he could not make the decision, and it was up to me. And a part of me was like, I wish the suffering would be over, you know, not just for her, but for me, you know. I had to watch her die, you know, and I wanted to really be over. But I kept going back, and I would go, and I would say, oh God, I got so many other things to do, and I was so busy trying to be this clean, recovering addict, and I was so good and loving and caring in here in the meetings with all of y'all, you know. And I was clean, you know, and it wasn't like I was using and I was out absent in the world. You know, I was a clean addict, and I just did not want to go, but I went, you know. And I remember on March 6th, 1997, we were in the hospice because it had got worse, and I was standing next to her. My brother was on the other side, and he had, right before this, he had walked out of the room, and he had given me a moment. And I remember standing there next to my mother's bedside in the hospice and saying to her, you know, I'm sorry. And not just saying I'm sorry, I mean feeling I'm sorry. And what I said is that I know that I cannot change what is already done. But I will promise you from this day forward that I will try to be a better person You know, I would try to be that person that you instilled in me to be. Because when my mother was handing out morals and values and all that stuff, man, I was high. I was not an adolescent. I was high. You know, my whole teenage life, all that stuff, when they were handing out, you know, how to cook, how to clean, how to wash dishes, how to run the vacuum, how to do your, man, I was high. The whole, do laundry, fried chicken, man, I didn't know none of that stuff. I was high the whole time. And I stood there next to her and I held her hand and I told her, you know, I'm sorry. And I said, you know, I will be the better person today. And then my brother came back in the room and some other women had come and we had come to pray. And I remember holding her hand and as she slipped away. And my mother died on March 6, 1997 at 6:45. At 8 p.m. on March 6th, I was in a Narcotics Anonymous meeting. Because what you guys told me to do is that when I didn't know what to do, that I could come to you and you guys would be a power greater than myself. And you would love me, and you would hold me, and you would help me, and you would help me to understand that I did not have to do anything alone in this process, you know. So I came to believe that you all were a power greater than myself. And then, you know, somebody said it was like a MAC card, don't leave home without it. I can't go anywhere without one of you. You know, sometimes I don't have someone here physically, but it's the things that I hear in meetings. It's the words that I hear in messages. You know, it's the things that have been ingrained in my heart, you know, that I carry with me all the time, you know. So my third step says, you know, I make a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. Man, I've been exposed to about 5 different religions in my lifetime. You know, I was born into a faith, then we went to this other faith, and my mother became all kinds of things, and she was doing all kinds of things just to get in touch with her God, you know. And my sponsor told me that it was a God of my understanding, that I had the right to choose. Man, and she said, what characteristics do you want your God to have? And I said, well, I want my God to be loving. I want my God to be caring. I want my God to be understanding, you know. And she said, that's all you need. And I used to say I want my God to be forgiving, but I heard one time that if I say my God is forgiving, that means he is also judging. You know, and because how can I kick it with a God, you know, and I need to kick it with my God. I don't know about y'all. I need to be able to share, you know, just like I'm talking here with y'all. I need to be able to have this relationship with God of my understanding that I am able to be open, honest, and free, you know. And so I have this relationship with this God that's loving, caring, and understanding, you know, because how can I trust my will in my life? How can I give my thoughts and my actions to a God if I think he's going to condemn me? Man, I did some stuff. I don't know about y'all, I did some stuff before I got here, and I've done some stuff since I've been here, you know. And so I had this relationship. And then in my 4th, and I believe 4 through 9 are the steps where we go inside and we start to uncover the layers, you know, all the armor, all the masks, all these things. They call them defects of character. I call them characteristics of myself. You know, all these things that I've lived with all my life. Man, y'all told me that I could not hustle. Hustling is an addiction, you know, finding ways and means to get more, you know, the guy told me last night I was a good salesperson. Man, what else did y'all do? You know, I don't know what you, I had to hustle, you know, and I hustled so that I could stay clean, you know, and you know, and I would say, okay, yeah, no, I didn't go out on the corner and whore myself, man, but fair exchange is no robbery between 2 thieves. I did what I had to do. If you said you got it and you said you wanted me to lay next to you or smile at you or talk to you so I could get it, then I did all that, you know. And so for a long time, you know, I would like be in denial about, you know, what I had to do to get what I wanted to get. And, you know, the same thing comes to mind with me about sponsorship, you know, because like for a long time, I would go in a bar with $2. And the thing me and my girlfriend would say is that we need a sponsor for the evening, you know, because I needed somebody to help me get what I was trying to achieve. So I needed a sponsor to help me achieve the high that I was looking for that night. So I had sponsors prior to getting here, you know. So now, you know, I got this relationship with this woman, and I don't want to work, but, you know, I really kind of want to work, and I'm doing some things, but it, you know, sometimes I want to get real laxed about it. But, man, I've always used somebody to help me get what I was trying to get. And since I was trying to get some freedom from active addiction, because I was trying to get, to be a better person, because I was just trying to get the ability to raise my head up, I had to learn how to open up. So 4 through 9 is where I began to uncover the layers of myself. It's where I learned all these things about my shortcomings, how every time, that I would think that I was doing right in the area, and then I would come to an obstacle, a wall or something, how I would fall short, and that would be one of my defects acting up, and it would be my shortcomings, because my shortcomings are where my defects come into play. So they had this thing called cash register honesty, and I would say, if I could be cash register honest, then I would be okay. I'm here this weekend with somebody else's equipment, with somebody else's money. The thing that I always think about is, what do you do when nobody's watching? Can you be honest with yourself? And just for today, I have the ability to be honest, to be trustworthy, to be a person of integrity, and steps 4 through 9 gave me all that. And so 10, 11, and 12, 10 step on a regular basis, I have to continue to keep checking on myself, and one of the things that happens in my 10 step is it reads in that Just for the Day, living the program, it talks about, did I reach out to a newcomer, and it was kind of funny because I too had my meeting with Mitch. Mitch is the man this weekend. I'm one of those people that if I see somebody that, I haven't seen before, that I try to reach out and I try to talk to and I try to hug, and I try to make people feel welcome. Because you know what? I was always the underdog. I always felt like the underdog. You know what I'm saying? I always felt like I didn't measure up to other people, And so I wanted somebody to reach out to me so many years. So now I try to be the person that I always wanted somebody else to be with me. So I was able to reach out and begin to talk and share and care with Mitch, and then I found out he was the guy with 34 days clean, because this thing, like I said, nothing happens by coincidence. It's all in the divine plan, and so I continue to show up and take my regular inventory and see when I'm wrong, promptly admit it, man. It used to be a time when I would be so arrogant and so self-centered that if I did something to you, I don't give up. About you. It would be about me. It's always about me. I'm always blaming you. You did it. I had no part in the wrong, and you need to fix it. You know what I'm saying? And that's the total self-centeredness of my disease. It's always somebody else who's at fault besides myself. But because we have some steps, because I have some principles, 2 things I got from this program that I did not ask for was a conscience and sensitivity. Immediately when I do something, man, I'm sorry, I was wrong, I need to apologize, I need to help, and so as a result of taking my inventory regularly, not just once a year or once every couple of years, I'm able to admit when I'm wrong promptly. And my 11th step, sought through prayer and meditation to improve conscious contact with God as we understood him. That means improve means that I already have a conscious contact. So when in my 3rd step, when I got this God of my understanding that was loving and caring and understanding, I have this God, now I have to improve this conscious contact. And I need to tell y'all a little story about me. When I got to my 11th step, I decided that I was going to go on a religious path. Now, all this time I'm coming to these meetings, and they're talking about Narcotics Anonymous, a spiritual, not religious program, and I decided that I needed to find God. And I'm just talking about my story. And I went to find God on a spaceship. That's right, I said a spaceship. I went to these meetings. I worked with this woman, and she was in this thing that she was doing, and they said that there were ships surrounding the area, of the world, and I was from this ship, and I had my stones read, and I'm talking about being clean, in recovery, no dope, with some steps, with a sponsor, with a service commitment. I'm talking about being clean and crazy, and I went to look for God on a spaceship. That amazes me. You know, I'm trying to get this conscious contact. I'm trying to get this steady line, and I'm telling you, I'm looking for it so tough that I'm missing that it's all around me and that it's within me. You know what I'm saying? Looking outside of myself for God, looking for God in a building, looking for God on a spaceship, you know. Missing that God lives within me. There is a God and a spirit that lives within me that is a giant. You know, and I remember, you know, telling somebody that, and man, I had a book, I had it all, you know, and they were like, Lisa, come on, you just keep coming back, you know, just keep coming back, you know, no matter what I do in this program, how crazy it is, and I have done some crazy things in recovery, you know, people just tell me, keep coming back. Man, we are some of, you know, now, we always want to be, you know, the worst addict in the world, and sometimes we think we are, but we are some of the most loving, caring, and forgiving people that have been put on this planet. We don't care who your connections are. We don't care if you don't have two shoes that match. We don't care if, you know, you kicked your dog every night after dinner. We don't care who you are. We love you. And we welcome you to this program. Because, you know, man, we were people who don't generally mix. You know, some of you here I've never seen in my life. You know, and some of you have never seen me. We are people who would not normally mix. But we come together for one common bond. That common denominator would be that we have this disease called addiction. And we want to know how we can stop using a day at a time. How can you help me get some help for myself? You know, and I continue to show up, you know, and having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, try to practice these principles in all my affairs. Practice is the operative word there. You know, I try to practice these principles in all my affairs. I am not a perfect addict. You know, I do not wake up every day and, you know, the sun is shining and I'm thinking everything is rosy and that kind of stuff. And I go along, doo-doo-doo-doo, you know, for the rest of the day. I'm not that person. I have bad days, you know, I have bad moments, not bad days, you know, because look, this is a feelings disease. And sometimes I wake up with a feeling, and then by the afternoon, I got a different feeling, and then by the time I come home from work, I got another feeling, and then by the time I go to bed, I got another feeling. So if I based all these things that I do on feelings and not facts, man, I would be messed up in here, you know. So I have to continue to show up. You know, and I have to continue to come and care and share with other addicts, you know, hey, this is who I am. You know, I stand here before you, a little girl growing up. It says we grow with love. That's the theme of this convention. You know, people have learned to love me because I have allowed myself to be vulnerable. I have allowed myself to feel, you know what I'm saying? I have allowed myself to grow through the process of working steps and showing up. And I need to tell y'all that I am involved in service, and I said earlier that I have hid in service. I have, been involved with our convention in our area for the past 6 years. I have 6 years and 6 months clean. That means that my whole time I've been in recovery, I've been on the convention committee, basically. You know, when I had 17 days clean, my first sponsor told me that I needed to get a commitment. You need something to do with yourself because you're just too damn busy, you know. Since you want to be a party organizer and a planner, here, how about you plan this? You know, and I started getting involved in service. When I had 17 days clean, I went to work on the phone lines, you know, because I needed to be there for somebody else. Because, man, I'm telling you, I was so caught up in myself, you know, especially when they started talking about somebody greater than me. Well, I was the great I am. What are you talking about? I had all the answers. You know, call Lisa. She knows, you know. But I got involved in service. And it was a couple of years ago that I had, you know, I was the chair of this, and I had 2 chair positions of 2 different committees. I was sponsoring 6 women. I had a relationship with a using addict. And I'll back up and talk about that later. You know, I had this relationship with this using addict, and plus I had my own personal recovery, and I was a mother at the time of, I believe, a 7-year-old. So I had all these things going on, and I worked a regular 50, 60-hour-a-week job on top of that. And I found myself in recovery with a program, with some steps, with a service commitment, with a God, in a fetal position because I had put so much on top of me. I had hid out in service. I was in this relationship with this using addict, and I didn't want to go home at night, so I did everything that I could. I put everything in my life to keep me away from home. You know, I tried to fill my life with so many things, and thinking that if I filled my life with so much of Narcotics Anonymous and all these things in Narcotics Anonymous, that I would not have to feel all these feelings that I needed to feel at home in order. Man, this thing works. We cannot go over it. We can't go under it. We just got to go through it, you know. And I remember feeling these feelings and doing all these things and being in this fetal position. And I remember calling my sponsor and I said, what can I do? What could I possibly do? How can I regain my sanity? You know, because I had become, you know, they say, you know, these service junkies. Man, I was using this as an addiction. I had become addicted to service, you know. And for some people, that might be a good thing. But for me, it put me on the verge of a nervous breakdown, you know. And I had to withdraw myself from some service positions. And I had to do something different, you know, because I get so caught up in giving back what was so freely given to me that I wasn't taking anything in, you know. And a lot of times, on most days, I'm okay with the service commitments that I have. I believe I will always be involved in service. I will always give back to NA. I still have a service commitment today. I still have 6 sponsees, you know, but just for today, I have time to be a mother. I have time to be a recovering addict. I have time to work on my personal recovery. And all those things I never did, you know. I didn't do that because I was so busy trying to hide out, you know. And I had to make some changes in my life. And the first thing that could go was the using addict. You know, of course, that was, you know, that was the first thing that needed to go. But, you know, I did what I had to do. And I stayed clean. I've lost some things in this process. I've lost my mother, someone who I loved very dearly, who loved me. I had the death of a child. I was in a car accident a couple years ago. I was on a road 70 east in our city, and I was dragged by a semi-truck. I remember, you know, they talk about these life experiences and that your life passes before you. I remember looking to the right of me, and it seemed like the cars that were coming were moving real slow. I was singing a song in the car called The Process of Elimination, you know. Very, very, very ironic that I would be singing that song. And I remember hitting this wheel on this car, and I remember turning 180 degrees to the right, and I remember seeing the cars coming at me that seemed to come in slow motion. And I remember grasping the wheel and turning the wheel and turning the wheel and turning the wheel. And I remember my car turning 180 degrees to the left, and I'm looking, and it still seems like they're coming in slow motion, you know. And I'm seeing my life come before me, you know, because I was on the on the right way to do wrong in the first place, you know. And I remember the car just stopped. It just stopped. I had been turning, and the car just stopped. And my bumper was way down the highway, and I was in this little Toyota Tercel, and I was in the car, and the seatbelt was on me. And you know how when you put on your brakes fast, that the seatbelt straps you in real tight? And I was in the car screaming, saying, they're going to have to dig me out with the jaws of life, you know? I mean, you know, just crazy. But I remember thinking that I needed to start making some changes in my life. And although I was clean, and although I was in recovery, you know, there were some things that I needed to change about me. I've become, in this process, a person who is trustworthy, a person who can be a friend, a person who can look another human being in the eye. I owe everything that I have to this point to Narcotics Anonymous. I need to share the story, the rest of the story that happened with my brothers, and we have been separated for 14 years. I was at a Narcotics Anonymous convention, SWACNA 1 in Delaware in 1995, and I decided, well, I finally found my dad. And the story is that my father lived across the street from me my whole life, and I didn't know who he was. And I finally found my dad, and I decided, you know, because I'm grown, I'm adult, and I'm clean, I'm going to make this effort to make this relationship work. And I drove across the bridge over into Philadelphia, and I went to see my father. And I went in my old neighborhood, and I had left my number with some friends that I hadn't seen in a long time. You know, the same people that lived on the block when I was a kid still lived on the block, you know. And I went over there and I left them my phone number. And I went home, and that Monday, my brother's grandfather called me. And I mean, he told me he knew where my brothers were. And I was able to get a relationship with my brothers. And it is a direct result of being a member of Narcotics Anonymous. It is a direct result of being clean in recovery that I have a relationship with them. I'm talking about miracles happen here. You know, the things, you know, it talks about lost dreams awaken and new possibilities arise. You know, if I hadn't been there, I would probably not have the relationship with my brothers now. All my brothers are alive. They're all clean. You know, they're all not clean. They're all not in jail. You know, they're not convicts. They're not, you know, anything but young men who grew up without a mother. You know, and so now we had this relationship, and two of them now live in Ohio with me. You know, and all that I owe the NA. You know, so when I say that I owe my life and that I feel like my life has evolved as a direct result of Narcotics Anonymous, because everything that I have in my life today, I have because of NA. You know, and I remember that, you know, there were some things that I wanted to do, some things that I said in the beginning. I remember thinking that if I could stay clean for 30 days, then I would be okay. Because I had to set short-term goals for myself. I couldn't look at the fact that I would ever have 5 years or more or whatever. You know, all I did is I tried to stay clean for 30 days. And when I stayed clean for 30 days, I said I could stay clean for 60 days. Then I said I could do this for 3 months. You know, and I wouldn't even think about them key tags, because remember, I already had the key tags when I thought I was clean the first time. You know, when I was in refusal. You know, so I gave myself this thing, and I said if I could stay clean for 90 days, and I could stay clean 6 months. 6 months turned into a year turned into 2 turned into 5, and here I am with 6.5 years. I'm still clean just for the day, you know. And I remember, you know, saying that I needed to do something with my life. I needed to become somebody. And so now I become this person of integrity. You know, I become this person of honesty. I become this person, you know, that you can be with, you know, someone who's not going to hurt you, someone who's not going to fight you, somebody who's not going to cross you in the middle of the night. I become not the person that I want to be, but the person who I'm supposed to be. Because just like I said in the beginning, I can't be who I want to be unless I accept the person that I am today. You know, I want to share one thing with you before I let y'all go, because I don't want to put you to sleep. And I love, like I said, I love the literature, and I read my basic text, and I'm pretty much, you know, a person that believes in the things that we read, because it says it was a program written so simply that we can follow this in our daily lives. You know, we are complicated people. You know, we try to make things harder than it really is. The most simple thing that I ever heard, and the thing that I believe the most, is that dope is an inanimate object. I've never got high one time, didn't get drunk one time, didn't use anything one time where it jumped off of the table and into my body. You know, so when we break it down to keep it simple, to follow that KISS system, you know, if I don't pick up, I can't get high. Real simple, you know. What is our message? The message is that an addict, any addict, black addict, white addict, gay addict, straight addict, you know, addict that used on Sunday, addict that used on Thursday, you know, it doesn't matter who, can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use. I stopped checking my disease every day, saying, I wonder if I want to use today, wonder if I want to use today, wonder if I want to use today. Maybe it's behind me, maybe I want to use today. I stopped checking on my disease, and one day I just lost it. I lost the desire to use, you know, and find a new way to live. I no longer live in that basement apartment I used to live in where I used to keep the curtains closed so it would stay dark in there because, like I said, I was a nocturnal creature. You know, look, I said it today, I mean it, I am a night person pretending to be a day person. I go to work every day on time just because it's habit, you know what I'm saying? Not because I'm one of those bright, chirpy, good morning, everybody. I'm not one of those people, you know what I'm saying? Not because of that, you know. Our message is hope. Hope that if an addict like me can stop using, an addict that wanted a sack buried in her casket, you know, if an addict like me who used every single day, I mean, I went to work, I still had a job, man, I worked on in a factory, warehouse type thing, and every lunch break, every bell whistle, every, 10-second break, I got high, you know. And if I can stop using, anybody can, you know. That's the hope shot. The hope shot is so important. And the promise of freedom. Freedom from active addiction. That's it. That's the only promise Narcotics Anonymous have. I can't tell you that you'll find your brothers that you haven't been in touch with in 14 years. I can't tell you that you'll get a relationship with your kid. I can't tell you that you'll own a Rolls Royce. I can't tell you, you know, that anything else will happen, but you will get some freedom from active addiction if you follow this program. And when all is said and done, our primary purpose can only be to carry the message. We all have different ways of carrying our message. You know, some of us, we yell at the top of our lungs. Some of us, we speak really soft, and, you know, we associate that with spirituality. But like I said, the Spirit lives within me, and sometimes I'm real happy and, you know, real jovial, and sometimes I'm just who I am today, you know. Our primary purpose can only be to carry the message to the addict who still suffers, and sometimes that addict is me, because that is all we have to give. You know, I came here to Indiana without any real expectations that the room would be filled. You know, Ray did kind of freak me out, I have to say that. He told me that I would be in this building and there would be a big picture of Jesus standing, you know, at me. And, you know, I was like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. Remember, I'm the same person that looked for God on the spaceship, you know. But I came here anyway, you know. And I came here to share the message, you know, and to share my experience, strength, and hope. You know, that if I can get through it, I mean, and I've been through some things, you know, and I have not found it necessary, not one day, you know, I've not found an excuse to get high, you know, and I just keep showing up, you know. So here I stand here before you, a true product of keep coming back. You know, no matter what's going on in your life, man, if you kick the dog every day after work, keep coming back. You know, if you got a boil on your butt, my sponsor used to say, keep coming back. Look, realize whatever happens in your life, that you don't have to die and you don't have to use, but just keep coming back. Thanks for letting me share.